dead, has been dead these 2 years.
You mean you're going to have the body of Miss Ferguson here at dinner? Oh, this is a little too much. If you'll excuse me, I'll dine elsewhere tonight.
Not so fast, Roberta. Perhaps you'd better wait until you hear the rest of the story.
This promises to be a very gay dinner.
Oh, yes.
Now, as you both know, I've never lost a case, except the Sydenham murder, which will be finished tonight. Now, I'm an egotist. I don't believe there's a criminal in all England that can outwit me. As a matter of fact, I've resigned from the criminal investigation for the sole reason of trapping Mr. John Bedford.
It's hard to believe.
Well, I told you I was an egotist. No criminal has beaten me yet, and no one ever will.
You have an awful lot of patience.
Infinite patience. I devoted 2 years to this case, and now that my moment of triumph has arrived, I wanted to have some witnesses. A writer who will record the event, and an admirer who will applaud with awe the trickiness of my scheme.
Well, if it's as gruesome as I think it is, I won't be here to watch it.
Oh, yes, you will. Horror has a way of fascinating and hypnotizing people. Besides, Arthur, you'd be ashamed to run out now.
I'll stay, of course.
So will I.
Good. Now, before I tell you my scheme, let me first acquaint you with the details of the murder. Exactly 2 years ago tonight, old Miss Ferguson...
Maid?
Yes, Miss Ferguson.
Why don't you answer when I call?
I was in the kitchen, ma'am.
It's after 10 o'clock. You should be on your way home.
I was just about to leave.
Has my nephew called?
No, ma'am. Mr. Bedford hasn't called since yesterday. I told him he couldn't come in, just like you said.
I don't ever want to see him again. He's no good. He's an evil man who will come to an evil end. You're never to let him in here, Hilda.
He won't ever come in this house if I can help it. No, ma'am.
Now you'd better run along and make sure all the doors are bolted.
Yes, ma'am. Good night, Miss Ferguson.
Good night, Hilda. A pity about that nephew of mine. I'll change my will. Won't leave him a penny, I won't. In the morning, I'll change the will. That's... Who's there? Who is it?
It's I, Aunt Martha, your own affectionate nephew.
What are you doing in my house?
Oh, you're not at all pleased to see me. Your only living relative, too.
I'd like you to leave at once or call the police, I've got.
I'd rather not, Auntie. I want to have a talk with you.
You don't want to talk to me. All you want is money.
Yes, Auntie, I do want money. And lots of it.
You've got all the money you'll ever get out of me. You won't even get a penny after I die. I'll see to that. Perhaps you'll appreciate the value of money after you've worked for it.
You know, Auntie...
You're wearing gloves. What are you up to?
I've made up my mind.
What are you doing? Keep away.
You're an old woman. All that money's no good for you. You can never use it. I'm young, and money means life to me. A rich and gay life. You're old, and you're going to die soon anyway.
No, it can't be. You're not going to do that.
Yes, Auntie, I am. You don't want to live anywhere. You're lonely, you're sick, and you're old. I'm going to do you a favor. Nobody can hear you now. I'm your heir. Your only heir, Auntie. You're next of kin. The estate is going to be mine. All of it. Now, don't you worry, Auntie. We'll have a fine funeral for you.
Pretty much the way old Miss Ferguson was murdered.
Oh, how ghastly.
Hilda found the body the next morning. I immediately went to work on the case. All the evidence pointed to John Bedford. Everyone believed he committed the crime. He almost admitted it himself. I had him brought to my office for questioning. Oh, hello, Bedford. Come in.
Thank you, son. I'll introduce you, will you?
Cigarette?
Oh, thank you.
Well, how does it feel to kill your own aunt?
May I have a light, please?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. I wouldn't know, Sir William. You see, I never killed anyone. Have you?
I have, Mr. Bedford. And I've sent quite a few to the gallows.
Yes, so I understand.
What was your relationship to Miss Ferguson?
She was my aunt.
Don't be flippant. Flippancy only proves your guilt.
Well, to tell you the truth, sir, my aunt didn't like me. She thought I was a spendthrift and a useless parasite, and she was quite right.
Would you mind telling me where you were the night your aunt was murdered?
Oh, not at all. In jail. I had drunk a little too much and gotten into a bit of a tiff with someone, that's all.
Have you ever been arrested for drunkenness before?
Never, Sir William. This was my first offence.
It's quite an alibi.
Quite a fact. It would hardly be possible for me to be in jail and kill my aunt at the same time, you know. Unless, of course, my aunt came into my cell and allowed me to murder her, after which she walked back to Turret House as a ghost, dragging her body behind her.
According to my reports, Mr. Bedford, you drink very little. No one who knows you has ever seen you drunk before. You probably got drunk in joyful anticipation of murdering your aunt.
As a thoroughgoing criminal investigator, don't you think you ought to check my story?
I already have. You've done a very skillful job. Too bad you couldn't use your talents for something constructive.
Oh, why don't you arrest me, Sir William?
No, Mr. Bedford, I have time. Plenty of time.
Well, you'd better work fast. By the time you get around to me, I'll have spent all of my aunt's beautiful money.
It's not the money we're after. It's you. Your beautiful life. Good day, Mr. Bedford. That's how matters stood. I refuse to let any of my men arrest him.
But how in the world could he have murdered his aunt while he was in jail?
Perhaps he bribed the prison guard to let him out for an hour.
Yes, Roberto, I believe he did. Unfortunately, the guard died of pneumonia soon afterwards, which left us no further source of evidence.
As far as I can see at the moment, Sir William, you haven't a leg to stand on.
You're quite right, Arthur, I haven't. Except that every man, particularly a criminal, has an Achilles heel. I discovered John Bedford's weakness.
What is it?
He's superstitious, and it annoyed me tremendously that John Bedford was my first failure. Here was a clever, calloused criminal who laughed at me. No one had ever done that before. Bedford knew I could do him no harm, and he made the most of it. Carefully and patiently, I thought it over. I looked upon Bedford as you would look on a Chinese puzzle. There is no such thing as an impregnable defense. A few months later, I went to visit Bedford.
Well, Sir William Brent. What a surprise. Won't you come in, please?
Thank you, Mr. Bedford.
Well, I'm honored to have the great Sir William Brent pay me a visit. You're not after any more clues, I hope. It gets rather tedious, you know.
No, not at all. I know when I'm licked.
Well, I don't want to appear smug, sir, but everyone has his Waterloo. Would you have a drink?
No, thanks. I suppose you're curious about why I came here.
Well, I'd hardly imagined it was a friendly visit.
On the contrary, it is. You see, I admire brilliant people, no matter what their calling.
Oh, you're very flattering, Sir William.
I've resigned from the criminal investigation. I'm a private citizen now.
Yes, I've heard about that.
Most people misunderstand me. It wasn't my love for justice that made me pursue my profession with such tenacity and...
Success?
With the sole exception of your case, of course. It was a game of skill to me, my wits against all comers. I lost in your case. But then we've all got to lose sometime, haven't we?
I don't believe you, Sir William. You're still out to get me.
Well, there isn't much of a chance, is there?
I'm afraid not, Sir William. I've kept out of trouble so far. Knock wood.
That's an odd habit for a man like you, knocking on wood. You're not superstitious, are you?
Huh? Of course not. Just a habit since I was a child.
I see. Well, now to the reason for my visit. I noticed in the papers that you're looking for a tenant for Turret House.
Oh, yes, I am.
I'd like to rent it.
Well, the scene of the crime, huh? Well, of course, why not? There's no harm in it. As a matter of fact, I'll let you have it very cheaply.
That's how I rented this house. The house where the murder was committed.
Well, what's your plan?
It had better be a good one. Mr. Bedford sounds like a hard customer.
Yes, it's a strange plan, but an effective one. I saw Bedford frequently. Our acquaintance blossomed into a kind of friendship, an armed friendship, of course. He knew I was out to get him, and I wanted him to know that. He's vain, very vain. and this game intrigued him. I also learned that he was very superstitious, although he denied it vigorously. Tonight is the anniversary of the murder, and tonight Mr. Bedford dines with us at 8 o'clock.
It's nearly 8 now.
Now, this is the plan. You know May Wakefield?
Of course. She's the famous Shakespearean actress.
That's right. During dinner, she will enter the room in the precise likeness of Miss Ferguson, the murdered woman. We, of course, will pretend not to see her. We remain outwardly unconscious of her. Only Bedford will be aware of her presence. I believe Bedford will confess.
I'd imagine he'd keep away on this night, especially if it's the anniversary.
He's giddy with success. And also, the fact that Roberta Stone, the famous writer, is here with us tweaks his vanity. He'll be here promptly.
Oh, I don't like this.
Well, this is just like one of your stories. It doesn't become you to be frightened.
Oh, I won't run away.
Well, there's one more thing. During dinner, the electric lights will be switched off at the main, and candles will be lit. We must have the correct atmosphere. You understand now? You're not to see May Wakefield. She doesn't exist for us. Is that clear?
I'll look right through her.
Oh, it gives me the creeps.
That, I am sure, is our Mr. Bedford.
The appearance of John Bedford suddenly made the whole scene grimly real. He was a tall, well-built man in his late 30s, immaculately dressed and perfectly groomed. At first sight, his face seemed pleasant enough, but on closer scrutiny, his gray eyes were hard and cold. He looked us over, all of us, with arrogance and superiority. I heartily wished I was elsewhere. This was one scene I had no desire to witness. After the introductions were over, we sat down to dinner.
Is it still nasty outside, Mr. Bedford?
Yes, and getting worse. Looks like we're in for a few days of this.
Too bad. I was going to do some riding tomorrow.
The soup is excellent.
Yes, your cook should be congratulated, son. The soup's a masterpiece.
Poor Alice. She's been my cook for 20 years. But she's given me notice, absolutely refuses to stay here, says this house is haunted.
So?
Roberta, this might make an interesting story for you.
Yes, Sir William.
You should speak to her. Alice swears that she has seen the figure of an elderly lady with finger marks on her throat walking about this house.
Oh, come now, Sir William. This is too good. Such an obvious attempt to frighten me. Sir William is convinced that I murdered my aunt. Please, Sir William, a little more subtlety. Surely I deserve it.
Perhaps the cook did see the figure.
As you very well know, Mr. Bedford, I don't believe in ghosts, and I'm sure my cook never saw this elderly figure. It's all in her mind.
Well, I'm afraid your little attempt didn't work, sir, but I must admire your graceful admittance of its failure.
Yes, I suppose I'd better give up, shouldn't I?
Oh, no, never give up. If at first you don't succeed, you know.
Do you live very far from here, Mr. Bedford?
Thank you, Miss Stone, but there's no need to change the topic. I hope you find this game as amusing as I do.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bedford, but this isn't my idea of pleasant dinner conversation.
Oh, we'll talk of pleasant things.
I saw a very exciting play last night.
Excuse me a moment. It's really fearfully hot in here. Do you mind if we get a little air, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. It is rather warm. Lane, open one of the windows, please.
Yes, sir.
Awful weather, isn't it?
Yes. I don't know how we're going to get home,
That's
really.
a bad month of the year. I'd intended to go to the Riviera for...
What's the matter?
Honest.
Lane, what on earth is wrong with the lights?
I don't know, sir.
Well, don't stand there. Light the candles. We can't sit here in the darkness. And get the chauffeur. He knows something about electric lights.
I'll call the chauffeur right away, sir.
I'm terribly sorry about this. We've had trouble with the wiring before. The chauffeur will have it fixed in a few moments. Now, let's get on with our dinner.
If this is one of your tricks, Sir William,
Or have some more wine, Mr. Bedford.
It was a tense and terrible moment. I looked at Roberta. She was pale and frightened. Bedford, for all his poise, was uneasy. He didn't know whether Sir William was planning anything or whether this was really an accident. My heart was pounding away, and my palms were moist with perspiration. Only Sir William appeared cool. There was not a trace of emotion in his face.
Oh, Mr. Bedford, you were saying about visiting the Riviera.
Yes?
It's quite a change from England at this time of year.
Well, I suppose I'll make the trip next month when I...
What's the matter, Mr. Bedford?
Nothing at all. I wish we could have some light. It's rather difficult to see.
Yes, I'm terribly sorry this had to happen just at dinner. Have a little more wine, Mr. Bedford.
Yes, thank you.
The figure of a woman had entered the room. She had come in silently, like a ghost.